Miller, can you grab another one of these?
I'm thinking of 2 letters.
Pardon?
I'm thinking of 2 letters that stand for.
Community development. Council decision.
What shows are going on at
Oh,
this?
Mike is here. It's a second surprise. You sure? You heard of it before?
I heard some people talking
Hey, Mike.
about it,
Yeah, a lot of people Saturday Night Live, like the big communities, the second city, and then Saturday night, and then Sunday. The theater has 116 complete original.
Can you make it? Do I need to get up? It looks like it's tighter than usual.
I'm going to be playing accompaniment for Western comedy.
That's awesome.
Yeah, it's really cool. I used to go, I can't even really remember it, I was that young.
Okay.
Did you go to Howe Caverns?
Yes.
Did you ever take the kids to Howe Caverns?
No.
It's
I
grown.
did it when I was like a tiny itty bitty, and I don't really remember.
It's grown considerably.
Is everybody here?
Yeah. I think we're expecting Mr. Insel to come later, maybe, but that's okay. We can go.
Yeah. Well, welcome everyone. Thank you so much for being here today. Really excited to have this kind of turnout. It shows that the community's engaged and interested in being a part of the process, which we are very grateful for. We're very lucky to have John Forster, who's here with us. He's with Carl Walker, who is the group that put together this the parking recommendations for development downtown. This is a meeting to debate. It's not a meeting to debate whether or not to implement a new parking program. A new parking program needs to be implemented with development happening downtown. When the award for the downtown development was given, we were instructed that a change to our current system was necessary. You know, developing this big piece of property, which provides pretty much the only parking that we have in Mass downtown, that if that was to be developed, obviously we needed to have another plan. So we are going to adopt a parking study as a plan, and we're sorting through all the specifics. And the first step is to establish a new program, a parking program with paid parking. This meeting is a preliminary step to solicit from the public what shape you think it should take. And did everyone grab this, or does everyone have a copy of the recommendations there outside? I got a couple here if anybody wants them. There's some outside as well. And what Carl Walker and John did was they provided 14 recommendations for putting together this type of parking structure. And from these 14 recommendations, we're looking to you for your input of which 14 you think have value. You know, some of them you think you may not think have value. This is where we need to find out from you, you know, what it is that you think about the recommendations. Your input will play a role in the decision-making process, along with the recommendations from our consultants and also in regards to best practices. So the 14 recommendations are in the study, which you can pick up outside. You know, we're looking forward to finding out what it is that you think. This new parking program, you know, we've identified as needing to be customer-oriented. It has to be flexible. It has to be adjustable and adaptable for changes. And most important, it has to be an asset for the city and for the residents. And this is something that needs to happen. The city is being developed, and we need the infrastructure to accommodate and to be flexible for the continued evolution. So that's kind of a little taste of what's happening. We have our Community Development Director, Matthew Miller, who's here, and John Forster from Carl Walker. Do either of you have anything that you'd like to say to kind of kick things off?
Yeah, I'd like to reiterate what Josh said, that this session is all about soliciting public comment in response to the report that was commissioned by the city and released by the council at the beginning of March. There are a number of recommendations, all of which have merit. We'd like to certainly hear what the community has to say, because everyone will be affected by it. John?
Thanks for having me back to Plattsburgh. I really do enjoy coming here. It's a wonderful city, and I look forward to talking to you more about the parking situation.
You want to just review for people who may not know the process that led up to the parking study? I mean, you know, it's been taking place over a period of time. You had several public meetings.
Sure.
And maybe some of you attended and were part of even that phase of this process. Then we, as a council, developed or adopted or acknowledged the plan, said that, yes, these are the recommendations, we accept and now we're going to actually formulate a plan in accepting these recommendations. Is that the way you understand it, my dear? Yes.
So, is there anything else that you guys want to lay down for groundwork, or
Should we talk about the process a little bit more?
Yeah, just
I can
review
do
what's
that.
taking
Just
place.
review.
Could we just touch on one thing before, that this is a parking study? It's not the development of Turkey Street, it's the parking study.
Right.
Yes.
Parking study, okay.
That's what we're focusing on,
Yes.
not the question
Not the
of
legal-
whether to develop the Turkey Street parking lot.
Yep.
Yes, no, the DRI was approved last year, and as a result of the DRI grant that the city was awarded by the state, the city put out an RFP for parking consultants to come in and answer some questions about what the city's parking situation would look like if that Turkey Street lot became something else. And so we actually started last August. It's been quite a while. We've been out here, we counted cars, we measured occupancy, we looked at a whole bunch of different opportunities. I think we had three different public meetings in the fall. Maybe the last one was the week before Christmas last year, talking about the options and what we've seen. We gathered, we did an online survey, which had great participation by the community. And we came up with these recommendations as, now, once Turkey Street parking lot, which holds the majority of your public off-street parking in the entire city, becomes something else, you have to manage it. Doing nothing is not really an option, you'll just have chaos. And so that's where the recommendations come out. What's the best way to move forward with the understanding that that parking lot is going to become something else, a development site. And so that's where we're at. I didn't realize it'd been 8 months since we got into this, but we have been working on it back and forth for that long. So.
John, do you mind sharing, other communities that maybe you've helped develop these plans that have put them into works?
Yeah, we're seeing it's a really neat thing across the country. You're seeing a lot of smaller cities really start to get the density in their downtowns that they need, where it's no longer an option to just have a few parking spots and everybody kind of does what they want. It's really a good thing. It means your city's growing. The cities that don't have parking problems are the cities that are contracting and dying. So it is a good thing. And so a lot of cities are struggling with how do we go from really an unregulated system to a system that needs just management so that it works well and it supports people. I often talk of parking as infrastructure. If you didn't have roads, if you didn't have cable, if you didn't have power, if you didn't have water, you couldn't do all the things that you want to do. And if you didn't have parking, your downtown can't function. People can't come to work, people can't come to play, people can't live downtown. And so that it's just a natural evolution of a growing city. Is we've got to now deal with this, and it's a good problem to have. If you didn't have to deal with parking, you'd have bigger problems on your hands. So.
Well, and one of the first recommendations that Mr. Forster made in his study was the idea of creating, alternatives, not only alternatives, but the suggestion that we might go to a paid system. And he laid down many suggestions about how we might go about doing that. We've been mulling those over for the last couple weeks, and we're coming closer to the decision. It seems inevitable to me. Of course, it always seemed inevitable to me that we should go to paid parking downtown. I think that was one of the first things that came to mind when I came into office, having been up to Montreal, having gone to Lake Placid, I believe it's in Saranac Lake in Burlington, that, that we have right now a kind of poorly enforced, this is the current status of our parking, poorly enforced parking. So there may not be the flow of parking in and out of spaces that there could be if it was managed properly. So that's one of the first things we're focusing on. And do you think we should kick off with that idea? And I'll
Sure.
tell them, why don't you speak to those ideas just briefly, and then perhaps we could ask the public to ask questions and make comments about that part of this plan.
Quickly, the idea of a paid parking system is to provide the best levels of customer service, and we make a recommendation that close-in premium spots have a higher rate, that there be some lower rated spots, and that if at all possible, to be some free or nearly free spots. So people have choices as to where they park. And that doesn't happen on its own. You have to manage that. You have to make sure it works. But a well-run parking system means that when you're going somewhere, there's a spot open for you to go where you want to go. And that's really the goal of a well-organized, well-managed parking system. Yes, there may be a fee for that, but you can make choices as to what that fee is, but the spot's available. Nothing more frustrating than to have 100 free spots with 100 cars in them and you can't go where you want to be. So.
Right, and John has helped us to see that you can have a managed parking program in which it's a customer service oriented program, so that the purpose of it is to manage your parking spaces efficiently enough so that access and fare rates are established. And as I said before, you don't have people parking there and clogging up the system for hours at a time.
Or days.
Or days, or days. So, is it a good time to invite the public?
Absolutely.
Okay.
I think, the whole purpose for this meeting is to get your recommendations and to get your input. So I guess we just ask that you come up to the podium if you'd like to speak, and we'd love to hear what you have to say. And it's re-implementing a time. Is there a time?
5 minutes.
5 minutes. So we definitely would welcome anybody who'd like to come up to give us your recommendations.
Name and address?
No, just
No.
if you don't have to.
I just picked this up, so I've got to read it, but 18 years ago, parking used to be managed just fine. We used to get over $100,000 worth of revenue.
You mean in the parking assessment district, or with
parking
paid parking?
all over.
With
When we
paid
had-
parking? With
Oh.
meters?
No, even before that.
Oh, okay.
Before that, we used to have meters before my time. But it used to be managed when, I know in the year 2000, they collected $100,000 in revenue. Since that time, things have gone downhill.
And you're talking about through enforcement?
Tickets. You're talking through tickets?
Yes.
Okay.
Okay, so all I say, my recommendation I'd like to see is put back the parking enforcement officer. If Albany can do it, we can do it. We just went down there the other day, there's all kinds of meters, we just waited for somebody, and all of a sudden that little meter was flashing, and I said to this girl, look at that's flashing, we can't, so, and she wasn't around the corner like that. We certainly need the parking downtown. I'm concerned about what's going to happen with the parking when Durkee is developed. So we
Right.
certainly need it. Can the money be used for a parking garage? Just throwing that out at you. And again, it needs to be managed much more efficiently. It used to be. There's no reason why it can't be. Again, we used to collect tons of revenue with 1.5 girl. And look at, I know you're still contracting out some of the ticket collecting. Please look at that.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Anybody else?
I just have a very brief question. I'm kind of unfamiliar with how a tiered fee system would work for parking. I'm just wondering how handicap spots would factor into that. whether the closer proximity would mean a higher rate specifically for handicap spots, or if handicap spots would also be tiered.
Wow, excellent question, thank you.
That is a good question. And just ADA spaces are usually handled, different communities do in different ways. I think that's a detailed question that is going to have to be answered. But by code, they have to be close to their destinations. They have to be in relative. Public parking gets to be a little different because, you know, Durkee Street lot isn't really close to anything. It's not close to a lot of things. So having a lot of ADA spaces in there, you might still be walking 2 blocks to your destination. But by and large, most municipalities charge for their ADA parking based on the location where it's at. So if it's in the premium zone, then yes, it's charged at a higher rate, and if it's at the lower zone, it's charged at a different rate. It doesn't have to be that way, I'm just saying that's what I normally see. But that's a detail that has yet to be worked out.
Okay.
Thank you, good question. Thank you.
Something you want to address?
I'm curious, which pot of money would the creation of new parking spots come from if they were to be developed?
Excellent. I'm going to defer to Matt and John on this. There's a system that needs to be in place, and we need some startup money for it. There has been discussion and even an offer from the Financial Restructuring Board about helping us with startup money. But you could tell them the latest about that.
If they're talking about brick and mortar, or if they're talking about starting a parking
Oh,
system.
okay. Yeah, are you talking about brick and mortar or the infrastructure needed to put, for example, kiosks and other kinds of equipment and the administrative piece?
New parking spots, just the tarvia to park on.
Right, so for example, some of the diagonal spaces that are mentioned in the plan or the other lots?
Yeah, it says about $20,000 per parking spot.
Yes.
Well, that's on a structured parking.
Right, that's a parking garage.
That's if you're building a parking garage. And that's just a detail that's, you know, if we're gonna build parking spots, that's approximately how much they cost. I believe it's what, $8,000 for a parking lot spot and $20,000 for a parking garage spot. But I think what we were just talking about was setting up a system. And it's hard to exactly say what kind of system would be in place. There needs to be some sort of parking authority set up, and whatever system is set up in place needs to be flexible to adjust to different demands and different, how the city really flows and how the structure faces. Now, what this study envisions is definitely a system that has a pay rate, and what that would be, it seems to be based on where the parking spots are, how long you wish to park there. There's different ways to do that. There's metered parking, there's kiosk parking. There's different ways to pay these ways now. There used to just be change. That will probably be involved as well. But there will also be pay by cell phone is the way I like the most. There's other ones that put in your credit card. We hope to establish one that does all of those. Another benefit of this is that the user fees will also pay for the administration. Now, that's not to pay for what you're asking for to build new parking spots. That will have to come from grant money. But in the future, as if new parking spots are needed, hopefully the parking authority and the parking system that we set up will be self-sustaining and will generate some revenue to provide for future spaces if the parking authority deems it thus. Yeah, so it should pay for its staffing, it should pay for its administrative costs as well. Now, it's not supposed to be a big money-making process. We're not trying to make profit as a revenue generating way to solve the city's budget crisis through parking. The parking system is to set up so that there's proper incentives for parking, so that there are spaces where people need them, so that parking is set up based upon how people's price sensitivities and that there's options available and that there's parking available. I know one problem we have now is we have, throughout the city, you can see signs all over the place, 30-minute parking, 2-hour parking. That's completely unenforced. People can park their cars there for days. And so there will have to be a system in place to do that. I envision something with parking in a specific spot costs this amount for the first hour, and probably would increase the cost over hours, over the hours that you park there. The first hour that you park there may cost $1. If you, the 9th hour that you
And
park
these
there
are
may
all
cost.
possibilities,
It's all
nothing set in stone.
possibility.
These
Maybe
are
it could
just-
be an hour of free parking.
This is not
We're
a,
setting
this is not a
rates.
plan, this is, it's just,
This is my idea in the back
Yeah.
of my mind, but that, the system that the council would establish would be to establish a parking authority that would act as a ambassador for the public, and things could change as it sees, as the parking authority sees fit there. But it would be a flexible system, and it would be some system that would provide organization to set up a well-run parking system throughout the city.
That actually didn't, my question was about the asphalt. So say
Right.
it's bare minimum, $8,000 of
I think that's, is that to create a new parking lot?
Right.
That's if there is no current asphalt and you're creating new asphalt.
which you're proposing 275 new spots, which would be $2.2 million for a non-parking garage arrangement. So whereas you said that money's coming from grants, what grant money is that?
And that's what Rochelle was touching upon there. There's been, there is some money available in the DRI. Matthew Miller knows more about that, because he's been on the phone with people from the state. Now, all the money from the DRI is not to build parking spots. That will have to come from grant money, hopefully from the state.
But the whole, one of the main reasons the governor instituted the DRI was to be able to use that money as leverage to get more money. And any of the communities who receive DRI funding then receive top priority in, say, the CFA process, where then
Consolidated
funding
funding.
application, so that you're able to leverage the monies that you receive from the DRI and then get put at the top of the list above any other municipalities who didn't receive the DRI. So it gives us a lot of opportunity because we were selected.
And I'll add that any final breakdown of funding will likely involve a number of funding sources, whether that be grant money, ongoing discussions with the Financial Restructuring Board, also possibly bond issues by the city. But again, these are details that will be worked out as the process and the structure of the parking program become more clear.
And forgive me because I haven't had a chance
That's
to
all right.
read through the whole study. As a retail business owner downtown, I hope that the council will strongly consider short-term free parking, because downtown businesses, I think, struggle with Route 3 because of what it's involved in coming downtown. So if there's the mental hurdle of having to look for parking and pay for parking, that would deter people further from coming
Oh.
downtown.
Mhm.
Because I know when I go to Burlington or Vermont, I'm like, do I really want to go downtown, right? Because there's the expense and such, so I don't know if that's in here or if anybody could speak to where we're at with that.
John, could you touch on that a little bit?
Oh, details as far as rates haven't been, I mean, we haven't worked through those details of what that's, the idea of a first hour free or something like that
I
has
think,
been
were you
brought
talking
up.
about enforced time limits on parking, so that people go and
No,
stay?
or just first
Oh,
hour
okay.
free,
Okay,
right, so
I thought,
that somebody that just wants to come down and go to the co-op or
Right.
Maui or, you know,
Right.
wherever
Sure.
that
Gotcha.
does.
I don't know what the final result will be, but that first hour free has been brought up several times. People have made that, hey, is this something that's to consider? Now that, most people stay an hour or less, so that's a pretty sizable hit from a revenue standpoint, but from a customer service standpoint, it's something worth considering, so. I'm a big fan of tiered rates, the rates that go up over time, especially on street, like lower rates for the first few hours, and if you're bound and determined to keep your car there all day, by the 8th hour, maybe it's $5 an hour or something, because we really want you off street out of those spots so that people can use them to get to the stores, and you should really be in a parking lot somewhere. Time limits are hard to enforce and difficult. If you want to stay all day, okay, well, you're going to pay for it, and that's a choice.
Thank you, John.
What about the rentals? We're just supposed to do the park.
I'm sorry?
What about the rentals?
People
It's
who
probably
rent
permit
people
park.
don't have a
Resident.
choice but have to park all day.
Well, there needs to be an organized residential program, which I've said in here, and the residential parking should be off-street as well.
Paid or unpaid?
I can't say for sure, because some landlords will want to bundle that and have it be part of your rent, and some will not. But parking, if it is paid downtown, like I said, needs to be options, premier, lower tier, and free if possible.
And I know I've traveled through different municipalities that have permitted parking in certain areas where potentially it's the residents are then permitted, whether it is included in rent or if it's something that you choose for the convenience to be able to have, then you would be given a permit and able to park in any number of those convenience spots if that's the direction that we end up going.
And those are management and detail decisions. Like, you could do overnight residential parking, but you couldn't park all day on the streets. Those are options that I've seen around the country that we will be exploring to find out what the best opportunities for people are.
And again,
So you say that maybe landlords will include that in the rent, so somebody's paying either the tenant or the landlord.
Yeah, so it's tax on people who live downtown.
But don't forget that we pay special taxes for
Right.
downtown,
That would go
for
away.
the parking.
That would
The
go
special
away.
assessment
Yeah,
district
that's one of the
would go away.
recommendations in the study.
That's,
So can I be charging the tenant for parking? You know what I'm saying? It was gonna be really hard to rent downtown if people don't have no place to park.
and these are challenges that, people face in municipalities all over the country. And that's why we contracted with Carl Walker, because they know what's happening throughout the country. We're not the only people that have renters in downtown. We're not the only people that have issues with parking. So
Now
that's,
we're paying a high taxes.
that's why we've asked you all to come to say, which of these 14 recommendations do you think are important? Which do you think aren't important? And that's why we need your input. And just for a point of order, we have a little bit of people kind of talking all over the place. If one person wants to talk, if you could just come up to the podium and talk quickly, and then we'll just be able to keep order.
Too flowery, so.
Yeah,
That's right,
you're
you're gonna get us
great.
hungry.
And I will note that recommendation 4 is to eliminate the parking special assessment. District.
I need to leave, so I just need to ask my question.
Sure.
The money that you supposedly say will pay for the parking spots, like 275, so which somebody worked out to be 2 point something, is it completely based on money that you're gonna get from grant? Or would the city residents at some time will have to fill the gap and pay for some of those parking spots?
Are you talking about for the infrastructure?
Yeah.
Like for a garage or
Yeah,
for?
yeah, for garage or even a parking spot, like you say, 8,000.
Right, a new lot.
Would the city residents, would the city taxpayers have to fill the gap sometime? If we don't get it.
Quite
if we don't get it
often,
in any other source of funding.
quite often, funding authorities require that the city kick in something. So it could be a
eventually it is-
90%, 10% match, for example.
So the city residents will have to pay for
We
us,
we don't know, and I hesitate to give you a definitive answer.
but there will be an increase on your tax bill.
No, not
Not
necessarily.
necessarily. Not
But
necessarily.
that is a possibility.
There's no actual plan to build a certain amount of parking spots. That's what we're here essentially today to do. Now, certainly there will have to be some built. Certainly the study recommends that some be built. If Durkee Street, which is holding most of the city's downtown parking, gets built up because of the DRI, we will want to build some parking spots elsewhere. Now, you're saying if the city, or if grants and if the state doesn't pay for all of those, will the city have to pay? Then I would imagine that yes, but that's an if that we can't really answer right now.
Well, I mean,
But that is
Well-
that is a possibility.
we could
And-
have to
and
have an
also-
infrastructural bond issue
We-
about this.
We would hope and assume and try to structure any solution to include a payoff for any monies that the city would owe. So, in other words, as we collect revenue, some or a lot of that revenue can go toward paying off, whatever bonding we have.
So
That-
even the collection of the revenue itself is an assumption. We have a parking authority
Yes,
that may or may not function as we envision it right now. It
Yes.
could fail.
we have an assumption, and yes, yes, it could fail.
With the bill.
Well-
The city residents, city taxpayers will be straddled with that burden.
One thing we should be concerned about is right now, we devote a considerable amount of money to maintaining parking and maintaining our roadways. If we have a way in the future to help offset some of those costs by a parking authority and the money it collects, that might actually turn out to be a good thing.
I mean, I'm not saying it's not a good thing. What I'm saying, I'm looking at the darker side.
Sure,
Mhm.
it's always good to
Yeah.
do that.
You have to have a more doomsday side and have
Yeah.
the right side too, so.
But I
That
think it's important
makes
maybe to
sense.
draw upon Mr. Forrester's expertise, because he's advised a lot of communities in going from free parking to a paid parking system, and maybe you could,
Oh.
address.
Where I live down in New Jersey, we did have residential parking permits, which were $130 a year. And most residents were happy to pay it. And that was just one time, once a year, you get your parking permit, you stick it on your window, you're done.
Mhm.
So that kind of thing works. What I'm concerned about is we pay that $8,000 for X number of parking spots that we need to build. We need for our residents downtown, our customers downtown. And we land in a situation where it doesn't work. I've seen that happening also. So that is my concern.
Yeah, well, that's why I'm deferring to Mr. Forrester, because I believe he has the data to address your question.
And if I could just touch, the discussion we had earlier that the parking system, it would actually involve the employment of an individual to manage, the kind of a goodwill ambassador. You'd be downtown, they could give you directions, they could show you where to park. They would maintain the kiosks, there would be a money collection. There'd be a lot of involvement with this. That would hopefully be paid through the permits, meters, fines, and tickets. Any leftover resources we talked would go to landscaping or streetscapes or improvement, that the money would stay downtown. I don't think it would go towards the maintenance, the improvements of the actual infrastructure. Any extra revenue would be invested in downtown.
Mm-hmm.
But the parking system needs to be developed basically first.
But you're talking about risk, is what I hear is if the city agrees to build so many hundreds of thousands of dollars worth of parking, and the parking system revenues don't cover that, who pays that debt? And was talking, my experience is, most parking systems that pool their on-street money, their off-street money, their ticket money, and keep it all in the parking system and don't spend it on other things, can cover their debt service. Now, if something happens and the local economy tanks, and suddenly no one's downtown ever for any reason, then okay, then your scenario comes true. You spent money and there's no one here. I don't really, you're investing, the state's investing $10 million in seeing that Durkee Street develop. I do think that a well-managed system should be self-sufficient. Only time can tell.
We've
You're
got-
absolutely right.
Sean, he was first up, sorry, Danielle.
Hi.
Hi.
So I guess my question is sort of a big picture question. The reason that we're doing the parking survey and planning on getting rid of all those spaces and creating all these new spaces and spending all this money is because of the want to free up the Durkee Street lot area to build something, right?
That's right.
Okay, so my question, I guess, Like, I've been coming to the DRI meetings for like a year and a half, for a long, long time, but went to all of them and contributed my thoughts and opinions. And I thought the consensus was sort of that the Durkee Street construction was a lower priority for most of the public in attendance at that meeting. So I'm wondering who's making the decision to...
Yeah.
The state made the decision.
That's right. And Sean, you walked in after we kind of set the parameters of the discussion. Josh opened up by saying that the discussion here tonight is not whether the Durkee Street
Okay.
lot is going to be developed, but
what's going to happen with the parking?
but
in
the
in event that it
parking.
is?
So in other words, it's not a, we're not addressing
The DRI.
whether it's
Okay.
a question.
This is just
whether
the,
or not to
the
develop the
hypothetical
lot.
parking conversation.
Well,
Just
it's
the parking
we have to
conversation.
put in a new parking model.
Right,
So
right.
it's what model are you thinking? And from the recommendations of Carl Walker, which of these 14 recommendations do you see as important?
Right.
And which do you think maybe aren't so important?
Right.
To develop a new parking program.
Did
which
you
we
get a
have to
copy
do.
as you walked in?
There's one here if you want.
Yeah. So maybe you can regroup, and then Danielle Erb was going to get up.
Thank you.
These are all recommendations that he's put forth. This isn't a parking plan proposal.
Yeah,
The
I
plan
think
has
it
yet to
is
be
a little bit
developed.
difficult to put those parameters on the discussion, just because like it's all related. But I do want to ask, it seems, well, I'll start with, do we know what order these things are going to happen in? Are we destroying the parking lot before we create the new parking? Or, because it seems like, you know, we already have a parking lot down by the waterfront that's not being used, which was done in an effort to, you know, attract a developer to the area, which we know hasn't happened. So we had to build it and they will come mentality there. And here we're seeing a destroy it and they will come, and which I'm afraid might be worse, right? So if we destroy the parking that we have prior to having created new parking, and that new parking necessitates paid parking for replacing the free parking that we had, don't we put ourselves in a really like precarious position there, as far as if we deter people further from coming downtown when we're already struggling to get people downtown, from it all just collapsing? I'm not against a parking authority. I think that's a great idea, and I think we need to start there. Okay, rather than
That's where
getting
we're starting.
rid of the parking that's working, that's at optimal occupancy right now. It is working perfectly fine right now. So why are we doing this? Like, I mean,
That's right. The recommendation from the consultants and also from the state are that the first thing that we have to do is figure out what we're doing with parking. Before we make any decisions on development, we need to figure out parking for a number of different scenarios.
so before Durkee Street development moves forward, we need to already have replacement parking in place?
From what I understand, we need to have a plan in place to manage parking of the evolution
But a
of that
plan
area.
doesn't mean that we have the parking.
What do you mean?
Well, just having a plan doesn't mean it exists, right? You didn't create the parking lot.
So it's
before you-
a plan to implement a new parking program in downtown Plattsburgh. That's what we're looking to do.
So the first step is to set up an authority, I think. That's your opinion?
Yeah,
That's
I mean,
my
I
opinion
think
too,
enforcement of the current parking laws, of an authority to manage money, you know, maybe instituting certain paid parking in certain areas on the streets maybe, but off-street parking, I think to take all those, what, 300, how many spots?
289 spots.
289 spots that are currently free, and getting rid of them all at once. And I think parking is a very complicated issue downtown. It's always been a problem. It's been a problem for business owners forever. And to do it, the DRI grant is a program that's supposed to be very quick, easy projects where they can come in. There's a very short timeline. It's supposed to be like a really quick, easy, like home run like projects, right? This is not one of them. It's very complicated. That's 80% of our parking downtown, or some number around it.
It's a good chunk of your off-street
It's
parking.
huge,
It's why we're all here.
of course. That's why I'm here. That's why
Yeah,
everybody else
it's
is here
not
too.
free either, so we're paying for it.
Yeah, right. We pay for it, but you know, if the cost gets gets put to the customers that we're trying to attract downtown, I mean, it's gonna cost a lot of money. Do we know what the prices are gonna be? We're looking at, from what research that I've done shows that any open air parking lot is a minimum of probably like $5 for a visit to park. I mean, do we know what rates would be like, or?
That would be decided by the parking authority. It'd be kind of.
But there are standard minimums, like, cause there's a standard for like how much these things cost.
Sure.
To put into place. So, like, we need to know, like bare minimum, like what is this gonna cost people to visit downtown?
So, I mean, and we had one person say that the first hour should be free, or at least the first somewhat should be free. John talked about tiered parking. I agree with tiered parking myself. I think the last time I went to Burlington, the first hour was 80 cents. It wasn't, and actually when I go to Burlington, the most frustrating thing is finding a parking spot, not the actual cost when you do. So I do think that now, we're not setting prices here, and the council never will set prices. We don't want that to be a politicized thing. That would be for the first step, I think you're right, is to set up a parking authority, and they would take all those considerations into effect. But I would like it to start out as relatively cheap, because we don't want to chase people away from downtown. We want to externalize that to the people who are using parking. We don't want people to park in front of irises all day because they can get away with it and it's free.
Right, so, but the timeline for the development of the Durkee Street lot is fairly short, right? I mean, they want this to happen within a short amount of time, from what I understand. So.
I'm sure the state wants it done as soon as possible, or as quickly as possible.
Well, do we have any answers on that?
Yeah, the development timeline for Durkee Street, we'd like to have a RFP for developers to develop a lot by the end of June, beginning of July. The state would like to see some sort of physical work done during this summer's construction season.
Okay. So this summer, we're looking at losing that parking.
Or this fall.
Or this fall.
And not necessarily all of it at the same time.
And do we have a timeline for establishing new parking to replace that?
I think you said if we had a new.
Well, recommendation number 2 is that the Durkee Street development has to put some parking back in down there. You can't just eliminate all 289 spaces and say it's okay. So, you know, there's probably some element of parking has to go back in, and the developer's gonna have to be part of that process, and I think it's probably gotta be structured parking to some extent, not a big 8-story garage or anything, but a couple levels that are integral to the building and the buildings that are down there. Or buildings, and provide a nice level of support. And so parking has to go back in down there. Now, there'd be an interim time where it's under construction and you've gotta make other arrangements for a short-term interim time. But parking should go back in down there.
Right, there's.
It has to, because not only are you taking out spaces, but you're creating new demand.
Right, but you're assuming there will be new demand.
My assumption is that the DRI and the development in Durkee Street will work, and that the downtown will grow because of it. If the assumption is the downtown will die because of it, well, then don't do it.
Well, that's the question, right?
And your assumption is that nothing will be built on Durkee Street?
Or that nothing will work and nobody will come, because we've already had build it and they will come and they didn't.
It's a risk, and
Yeah.
I'm not sure. In my opinion, I'm not against development at the Durkee Street lot site. It's not the highest and best use of that land, but to do it so quickly, I mean, it seems like it should be done in smaller increments and steps to ensure that we have the replacement parking in place. And we know what that's going to look like.
I think that's the ultimate goal, yes.
And are you also concerned about where people will park during the construction?
Oh, yeah, I mean, I know I've heard it suggested that people park down at the marina during that time.
That is one of the suggestions that the study suggests. And during construction, it's gonna be difficult.
Right.
There's no doubt. And we're probably gonna, the study envisions improving the walkways through Green Street, bike paths through Green Street to that parking lot.
Shuttle system.
And setting up a shuttle system. It will be tough. It will.
I'm
will
just
hurt.
concerned for the downtown businesses. You know, a lot of them are operating month to month, and a bad month could be the end of it, yeah. So, I mean, you're looking at, if we don't tread very lightly and carefully in how this moves forward, you're gonna kill the majority of the businesses downtown.
And again, you know, we're not the first municipality to go through these kind of growing pains, and that's why we're working with experts who do this throughout the country to give us best practices and I guess the best guidelines.
Sorry.
And
Do you
Danielle,
have
the
concrete?
5 minutes is-
Okay, sorry, I didn't know there was a limit on us up
okay.
here. Do you have concrete examples of other cities like that have extremely like similar situations?
Was that a
as
pun,
us?
Danielle?
I'm just, my last question, and then I'll step back.
No, you didn't get the joke. All right.
Concrete, I got it.
Yeah, okay. Sure.
Hi, my name is Will. I'm a student at SUNY Plattsburgh.
Sure.
And I have had the privilege of kind of joining and sitting in on the Strong Towns Coalition meetings led by Danielle and some other people in this room. I think the first point I'd like to make is to voice kind of I certainly can't speak for everyone at the college, but I certainly can express the sentiments of those many people I've talked to that are unable to make it today. And the first point I'd like to make is strong support for suggestion number 11 in this packet, which is to add bicycle racks throughout downtown. And in addition to that, I don't think that would be possible without improving general bike safety in the town, because at the most traveled routes to downtown, at least that I take, do not come with bike lanes. As someone that comes from New York City, I used to bike a lot there, I feel less safe biking in Plattsburgh with the speed of vehicles and the unregulated intersections that I did in the city. The main point I want to make is that I'm really troubled by a lot of the things that I've heard today at the meetings, especially after coming from the Strong Towns meeting. For a council to come out and set parameters on what should be discussed in the meeting regarding commercial development, when there has been obviously polls done asking the community and inviting comment and showing that the DRI grant and the allocation of those funds are not consistent with the allocation that is desired by the public, and to sort of say that all discussion on that is closed is disheartening. And I've never certainly heard the concept of customer service being applied to parking, but by doing that you effectively refer to your citizens as customers and not citizens. And so the point that I really want to make is that although maybe student representation has not been as strong as it should be at places like this, there is a reason why there is not a big number of students that graduate SUNY Plattsburgh and stay downtown or stay in the city. And that is kind of because the inviolability of downtown, and that problem will only get worse, I assure you, if you go ahead with the current allocation of funds that is in line with the DRI grant. And I guess the last thing I want to say is that it is unwise and a gross underestimation to kind of devalue or not take into consideration the thought of the student body. I hope that all of you kind of were able to witness the organizational capacities of the student body the other month. And I certainly can't speak, obviously, for all students, but this is not a project that the student body supports. This is not a project that the faculty of SUNY Plattsburgh supports. And by continuing to kind of try to silence the opposition to this project, it's disheartening. And as someone that wants to stay in Plattsburgh after I graduate, it's sad. So I want to leave you with that.
I'm confused by project, you mean the DRI?
Yes, with the current allocation of funds that is suggested by the DRI.
And you think this council sets the allocation of funds by the DRI?
This council certainly is willing to follow through with those allocations. And I don't think that it's really a valid point to say that you have no say in the allocation of funds.
We didn't.
We don't. The state
decided on all the projects.
Gives $10 million. We're not spending $10 million. The council's not coming up with $10 million with an idea of how to spend them.
And we didn't decide which projects were funded.
Okay. Yeah, well,
the council can ask the state to reallocate.
Certainly, and the kind of
that's what Strong Towns has been pushing.
Right, and so so what I'm hearing from you guys is that you're perfectly willing to kind of defer to the state's judgment and let them kind of roll over with
That's what
this
you're hearing.
misallocation of funds. That does not coincide with public view. It is not.
I don't think that, I mean, since we've already gone outside the parameters, I'm totally someone who my whole life has been receptive to ideas that the strong town movement advocates. But having been someone who followed this process just like you, went to as many meetings probably as you did, and even perhaps questioned whether or not there was sufficient public support that supported the allocation of the 4.5 million. That's what the state did award, and I still think the jury's out on the extent to which public input was supposed to be part of the formula for the award. And, I know there's been actual conversation and requests for the data that went into the decision. Maybe that's a subject still of inquiry.
Absolutely.
But I don't think, on the other hand, that it's fair for you to try to characterize the whole college and the whole student body as having a particular point of view either.
I said time and time again, I cannot speak for
Well,
the
I know,
student
but you
body.
did suggest that there
It's asserted that the faculty supports your point of view. I
Yeah,
don't know
okay,
that.
that's
I'm not
okay.
the faculty.
Let's come to order here. So the thing is, we're both kind of representing our point of views, and let's make sure we don't overstate.
I thought I made it clear, but I will reiterate
Okay.
that the views and concerns that I express are the ones of the sentiments of the people and faculty that I've talked to at the
Okay.
college. I can, obviously, and I've said this, cannot speak for the college.
But you did say that people at the college don't tend to stick around Plattsburgh because downtown's not viable.
Yes.
Okay. So, but then you're against the state's attempt to develop it?
Is he on trial?
No, I'm just.
What's going on? You're a representative of the people, man.
Yeah.
What's your
You're,
point?
you're elected by these people here who are telling you that we want maybe something different. You should be our advocate and not our opponent.
I'm being your advocate. I'm trying to understand exactly what he's saying. So you're trying to talk about allocation of the DRI.
Yeah.
Okay.
Does that answer your question?
Sure.
Okay. Right. And so, yeah, I thought I made that clear, but I do not speak for the college. I certainly do speak for the people I know at the college, and I know a few. But I'll leave you with the point that I certainly would not underestimate the capacity for the college to resist this plan. And I don't think that you should either. Thank you.
Thank you.
Very well.
So my name's Elizabeth Yoakum, Libby Yoakum, and I just wanted to speak on behalf of maybe seniors in the area. I can walk downtown and walk around town for many blocks to pick up a bottle of wine across the street or to get a pair of running shoes or to eat a fine meal, but I cannot shop at the co-op and not have very convenient parking. And it is a serious problem because the co-op is this big anchor down here, and we can't hurt the co-op at the expense of trying to do some things that are sort of unknown. So but I really feel serious. I walk into the co-op, there are lots of older people, and we can't haul a week's worth of groceries 2 blocks, 3 blocks down to the marina. I can hardly, usually I get help to take them just even into the Durkee Street parking lot. So like they did in Burlington, their cooperative there's a parking area that's specifically for the shoppers of their
Yeah, that's a
store.
lot they bought.
Huh?
They own that lot.
Yeah, yeah.
That
And,
makes
I
it
mean,
a
that
little
is-
different.
It's tremendous, though.
Yeah,
I mean,
it is.
because we know that we can shop and get numerous products and then be able to walk right to the car. So I think it's serious because the alternative is then to go to Hannaford's or what used to be, uptown anyway, instead of staying downtown, which of course I prefer. So I think it's a serious consideration.
Well, that's what we want. We want people to want to come downtown.
Right, so we have to be able to walk in and out of the co-op. It may be brief, but we need to be able to access that easily, the closer parking lots. So,
Well, as a former member of the co-op board, and, you know, and having been a shopper there my whole life, I mean, I took the initiative to try to speak to people from the board and listen, and we've been listening. And as we said at the time, you know, there was another community development director sitting in on the conversation, but it would be crazy for us to develop something that was going to be a detriment to not only the co-op, but any downtown business. The whole point of any development or any parking plan is to enhance the situation and make things easier, better, more serviceable. I mean, you know, I appreciate the former speakers, you know, or somebody said something like, we're into customer service, we're citizens, not customers, but there's a special way in which you've got to look at our customers who come downtown and who want to shop or, you know, go to any of the services. We have to make that work, and that has to be the prime reason behind anything we do here. And I hope that, you know, we'll incorporate all of the concerns that are here tonight, and concerns about parking for running in and out of a store. That's got to be part of what we consider when we set up this parking program. Maybe it's an authority, maybe it's a program, maybe it's a system, but this office that will administrate all of the parking that goes downtown for a paid system. We're not exactly sure what kind of form it's going to take. We know we have to be sensitive to the price points for any particular kind of person who goes down there. It may need to and probably should incorporate some free time in certain areas. So, thank you. I mean, we're trying to listen. And I know that maybe we didn't look so good earlier when we had that exchange. I apologize if it seemed like you were being cross-examined.
Hello, I'm Sasha. I've lived here my whole life. I'm a homeowner, and I have 3 questions. 2 of them are specific to point number 14 that references the residential parking permit program. So the first question that I have is, are the residential parking permits going to be doled out essentially to the Durkee Street development residents and included in the rent in those properties from the get-go? So will they have essentially prime parking there, or will that be something that's decided on? The other question I have is, so it also says that landlords or the residents may be responsible to bear the cost of the parking permit. And I'm wondering, in other cities, are there programs for either low-income residents or people on fixed incomes, if this is an undue burden or cost for them? Is there some kind of alleviation program or breakdown of prices or a tiered system for those types of residents? Because as we know, our city has a very low income population, especially in the downtown area. So that's my second question. And then my third is, as we are talking about formulating this parking committee or I'm forgetting the exact word, but the program coalition, how will those spots on that coalition be decided? Will it be voted on by the public who will be heading that office, or will it be through private hire, or how will that system work out?
The parking authority.
The parking authority, yeah. Okay. That would be an employee.
Okay.
Or,
I guess I'll
or a
take
staff.
the answers to my 3 questions sitting down, but thank you for your time.
Yeah, but you know what? Did you guys make a note? You've been making note of all the questions, right?
I tried to make a note of those 3 for sure.
Right.
So the residential parking permit allocation was number 1.
Right.
Residential parking permit allocation. That is going to be these are all 3 of your questions deal with details that have to be worked out. The developer of that site, whomever that is, that part of the agreement that they strike with the city will be how many spaces they build for their development and how many spaces they, along with the city, develop for additional public parking. They're gonna want, I'm sure, if they're gonna pay for them, some satisfaction on the spaces they pay for and build, how they can use them, because they'll be their spaces. So I don't know, I mean, if there's residential permit parking that's built and they don't have parking spaces along with it, my assumption would be they fall in line with everybody else's and wouldn't necessarily get premier spots. If they build spots with them, they're gonna wanna allocate them to the people who are part of their development. So again, detail to be worked out. The alleviation program for low, that is again another detail that.
In your experience and your expertise, are there other programs that exist in other cities that you've consulted for? Because I guess my concern is that we're going to be pushing out lower income residents from our downtown area, which I think actually makes it really diverse.
What point well taken. Thank you for asking.
Criticism, but just a question and concern.
What I've seen is that when you start making exceptions, well-intended or not, you get a very mushy system that someone is inevitably going to feel like they're getting ripped off, and the more exceptions you make. Now, can organizations step in and help pay those fees for people, or arrange? You're a little disadvantaged because you don't have a great public transit system, and some other things that you would normally have for people who live downtown. Truly, people who are on the lower end of the income scale, a lot of times they don't have vehicles at all, because they rely on the public transit system. Without one, then you're talking about another level of trying to figure things out. And so I would say that the opportunity to have some free parking for those should be there. Unfortunately, to carve out spots and say these spots are just for this group of people, that's.
Well, it wouldn't be spots that carved out, but just a structure or part of the parking permit program that if, say, there were income guidelines or it felt like an undue burden, that you could apply. I mean, there are senior citizens who are on fixed incomes that live downtown. Agreed.
And that would be a council decision.
Okay.
Or not a council, but an authority board decision that would probably, and like I said, I always will tell my clients, be careful with your exceptions, because everybody will come to you with a good reason. There's no, people don't come and say, I think I deserve it because I'm just better looking than everybody else. People come with good reasons, and so you just have to be careful with those exceptions. And you have to structure them properly, and it has to work into the overall, the financial part. You talk about the risk, with every exception becomes more risk on the back end of the taxpayers for the physical, turning on the lights, plowing the snow, and building, looking where we're going to.
Social programs would probably pick up that stuff on the other end, but that's a different conversation.
Yeah.
Thank you for your answer.
That's a good way to go if that can work.
And as to employee hiring for the parking authority, that will be determined as the plans evolve over the next several months.
So as far as downtown residents are concerned, in the cities, they have alternate side street parking, which is free at night. Of course, you cannot park during business hours, but at night you can park it. The way I see it is, during the day, if you need to park it by the harbor or the dock lot, which is free, and then drive it back at night.
Where do you park during a parking ban?
That is a big detail that still needs to be worked out. And we talked with DPW, and they understand that the way they do things will have to change. So,
I think we're all here because we don't want to lose any parking spot downtown, right?
And the goal.
We need all those parking spots.
The goal of having a managed system is that you have those spots and that they're available, and that when you want it, you can get it. Where we're at with the Durkee Street site, again, my perspective is not if we build it, they'll come. They're coming. We've got to make a plan to adjust to the fact that Durkee Street lot is not going to exist as it is. That's my perspective on developing the parking plan.
you gotta make multiple levels. So
There you go.
The first level, it's ours. Second level, it's the developer, and then the third, whatever they're making on this development.
So and that's what I say in here, point number 2 is parking has to go back. So, but having a managed system that someone is watching out to make sure you do have a spot and that it's managed properly and that it's open when you get there and someone else hasn't taken it. And that's the whole point of having a parking system that works and functions. And that's, when I say customer service, that's what I mean, is that the patrons, the people, the residents, the people who are coming downtown, someone out is looking out for them to make sure they have parking, and that it's available for them.
That's what we're here. We don't want those lane parking spots. Right?
What's that? I
So
missed
we don't
it.
want to lose any parking spot downtown.
Well, the
Because there
plan,
is no.
You can't be, right.
I agree.
I've been here 30 years. It's been always a problem parking.
Yeah,
You know, you cannot run a business with no parking space.
right.
And that's exactly what the study is supposed to do. Especially to set up a managed system, it should be run efficiently so that spaces are there for people that need them. What I'm hearing a lot today is that parking's already a problem. And if we just get rid of the Durkee Street lot because it's being developed, then we're gonna have an immense problem. The biggest, the study does talk about putting in parking, especially around angled parking. We'll bring a lot more parking around the Durkee Street lot where it exists now. There's talk about putting in other parking lots as well, Division Street, Court Street. There's even an option for Trinity Park. I have my.
Where on Court Street?
Oh,
So
it's in, did you grab one of these?
They're all possibilities.
these are possibilities. They're not definites.
There's
That's
a
what we-
document
that's what we're
outside
here
if
to
you wanna
hear,
grab it later.
Public opinion about. But the main push, I think, is to get a managed parking system so that people aren't parked on Clinton Street right next to your business for days on end, that it's, that it's set up in a system to be run efficiently, so the externalities are applied to the people that use it, so that parking is available, because we have more than enough parking in the city, I believe, if it is managed correctly and externalities are handled correctly and incentives are applied correctly, that the parking should be there for our downtown businesses.
But we used to have a system. The ticket person used to be over there. They used to move, vehicle around. And all of a sudden they took it off. Why?
I don't know.
He was making $80,000 a year income for the city. And we spent $18,000 for the poor guy going around.
Yeah, and we had
It don't make no sense.
the first constituent that came up and spoke said something very similar, that, what did she say, about 18 years ago, we had a parking system that was making, I don't know, I'm not familiar. But yes, enforcement needs to be the #1 thing. We have signs throughout the city that says 30 parking, 2-hour parking. They're widely ignored because they're not enforced. And I'm not here to say that that's the best system, the 30-minute parking. If we just enforce that, is that the best system?
I think it would be the best system when you make money, and plus you employ one guy. He moves the cars around.
You do want that turnover. You want,
Yeah. That's what I'm saying.
you want the spot in front of your store
Yeah.
open, so people can get to you.
That's what I'm saying.
And when I was talking,
So, the ticket person was making the cars moving around.
and that's what you want, essentially, right? Is that
That's
correct?
what it used to be. I used to work in.
We want open
Yeah,
spaces
so
downtown.
you were saying, why fix it, it wasn't broken, why did you change it?
Yeah, we fired that guy.
Yeah. It was like a budget saving.
No, and that's essentially it. I mean, I think even if we did all of John's recommendations, there's ways to replace a lot of the parking, but it can't be an unmanaged system. That's why his #1 recommendation is that it needs to be a managed system. And I'm not a parking expert. It would involve hiring someone to oversee that system, so that there is turnover. So that even in the Durkee Street lot, you see cars parked there. And John actually sat out there and watched how many cars would leave. Now that we do have a well of free parking down at the harbor, you'll see one of his recommendations is to increase walkability and accessibility to that lot for people that are price sensitive and need to park or want to park their car and just leave it. to park there, but we need to have a managed system so that turnover is appropriate and that people can park according to their sensitivities, their price sensitivities, and what they want out of parking. It should free up a lot more parking downtown and allow for more efficient use of the current parking spaces we have. Now, one thing we haven't talked about yet, or very few people have brought up, are adding parking spots. It's been hinted at. Their parking study does take into effect, like I said, the angled parking around the Durkee Street lot, and there are also options for increasing efficiencies of parking lots that already exist by combining them together over on Court Street. I think that recommendation, if I'm not incorrect, is talking about incorporating 3 parking lots together, which would also require communication and agreements with the county as well, and also closing off Court Street and essentially making all those parking lots into one big parking lot. And by increasing the scale, it increases the efficiency and causes about 70 to 80 new parking spots.
And that's a possibility.
That's a possibility. It's not a
decision.
And also, I just had
What do you mean closing Court Street?
And we're way over the 5 minutes, I'm sorry.
Well, and actually, just a quick follow-up. Can I just get a show of hands of those who still wish to speak or are hoping to speak? 1, 2, 3. Okay. 4. So we have, I would say we have time probably for 4 more speakers, and then we'll try to limit our commentary and leave it to John and the experts to be able to help answer questions and receive a recommendation. So Kevin, do you want to?
Kick this off. I hope it don't sound too much like an asphalt. Anyways, I mean, I wish we had the time for you to go through all of the points in this, that way we could. But unfortunately, like many of the people who said, they have not been able to read through this entire thing. I doubt that we'd actually be able to, we would ever implement all of these, not any of them, but some. So we don't have a parking authority yet.
Nope.
No. With the parking authority that doesn't yet exist, we are going to fine and ticket people so that way we can make money that we don't have any place to put it. So how do we, now let me rephrase it. So we don't have a parking authority. So we have no way to enforce the parking that we would need to free up. So that way we can best use the lot as it's under construction.
Well, I think the first step is setting up this parking authority. The first step is going to a managed parking system.
So we have 2 months to do that, right? Because in 2 months it'll be June, 2 months will be construction season. So we have 2 months to come up with a parking authority, hire everybody for the parking authority, implement the recommendations for this, all in 2 months.
I don't think that 2 months is necessarily.
Okay, so let's do it, so then it's the fall. So then the fall, we will be implementing the recommendations for the following year to construct the parking lot. Well, I want to know the definite timeline for this, how we go around saying that we're not going to gentrify downtown because of it. Which, if we do have paid parking, is exactly what we're going to do. We already see it in the trailer parks around Plattsburgh and the surrounding area that we're already gentrifying those. Like, we are beginning to gentrify downtown. So how is it that we, in good faith, can be led to assume that this parking authority is going to be implemented in whenever to create to implement the recommendations, who knows when, for some plan that is a home run? Because this is a tool, not a dream, Representative McFarland. We implement this, like we get together as a community, because I think we all, I think we all have a vision of Plattsburgh. Like, I think we all want the best, and I think we all can work together to get there. I just want to be realistic in these goals. Like, I mean, we can support Tenzin when people call him racial epithets, but we can't support him when he comes up to speak in front of us? What? Come on. Like, we're better than that. So, what I want to, so maybe you can enlighten us as to a solid timetable for this? Like, what other communities have been in this time restriction that have implemented successful parking restructuring?
I have said, and it says in here, that I think you need 6 to 9 months to implement the system,
Okay.
to get it up and running.
But the state has only given us until November.
The state would like to see some development on Durkee this year. That does not necessarily mean that all of the parking that is currently used on the Durkee Street lot will be unavailable this year.
But we have to come up with a recommendation, like within less than the 6 to 9 months. Like not even the minimum. We don't even have the minimum amount of time to create a parking authority, so that way we can implement the recommendations, a successful one. Like the bare minimum, we don't even have. So how do we? So now I hope we are now have our feet on the bottom of the pool. We are all realizing how serious this is. This isn't just some home run grand slam. Like we are in deep, not good waters. So like hopefully.
What did you say at last?
Not good waters. I was going to say shit, but I didn't want to.
Oh, I see.
So.
Thank you.
I hope I'll be brief. What is the timeline that this solution for parking is going to be good for? That is, will the system we develop be good for 10 years, 20 years, 5 years, 2 years? Has that been part of your consideration?
The system needs to be flexible so that it can change as the city changes. And that include, how long is it good for? I don't like to look at anything past about 10 years because you don't know what's going to happen.
That's my point. I think autonomous vehicles are going
Autonomous
to change entirely
vehicles.
the way people travel and park and use vehicles.
But anybody that tells you they know exactly how autonomous vehicles are going to affect the world, they're crazy.
Autonomous vehicles?
Self-driving cars.
Self-driving, okay.
So, I think what you need right now is oversight of your system so that it operates well enough to make sure, to give people a sense that I have a parking spot downtown when I need it. And for 5 to 10 years, to think ahead 5 to 10 years, that's also part of what having a parking system is, and having a board or a commission for the authority does is they look at the future and they say, we can sell off this lot to for something else because we don't need it anymore. Or hey, we think we're going to need another 280 spaces in the next 6 years. We need to figure out how to bring those online. Is that a parking structure? How do we do that? That's part of the authority's job, is to look forward and say, this is what the industry's doing, this is what downtowns are doing, and we need to be prepared to handle this. And that's a big part of their job.
I think you maintain a lot more flexibility by entertaining development plans for the Durkee lot that are incremental.
I agree with you.
Yeah, that's
yeah.
what I would like to see done.
Me too.
Thank you.
I'm back for just 3 more brief questions that have kind of come up over the course of the meeting. I'm just curious as to what angled spots on Durkee Street would look like. Like, would the lanes be, would it be 1 lane, or would it be, just kind of condensed, and what would bikes?
Oh, so my understanding is basically we'd have to cut into Durkee Street. So the Durkee Street development would be slightly smaller. And have you been to Burlington? Like that's what an angled spot is. You can get a lot more. I think, John, what was the ratio? You can fit about twice as many.
Yeah, you get about twice as many angled spots as you can get in a parallel spot.
Okay.
It's almost 2 to 1, maybe.
And I think in here there's actually
he's going to try to.
He's going to put some up.
He's going to
show, we did do
an artist rendition of what that would look like. But basically, you get a lot more parking around that system there.
The lights are.
Yeah, do you mind people sitting next to that light switch just to dim one of them? Thank you.
So this is purely conceptual thing. I took Durkee Street and I pushed it into the site a little bit so that you could go, right now on Durkee Street you have one side, the west side, has some parallel spaces, and I put angled spots on both sides to try to maximize the amount of parking that could be gained. Because if that site is really flexible, if you're tearing it up, it becomes flexible and you can do something different with it. You can't move the curbs on the other side of Durkee Street. There's buildings there, and you can't move the curbs on the north side of Bridge Street. There's buildings there, but you can move on the south side of Bridge and on the east side of Durkee. So that's what I've tried to do there. This is purely conceptual,
Yeah.
you know.
It looks like it would allow for only one lane,
You could do Durkee Street one way or two-way.
depending on how much you widen it.
Depending on how
right?
much you widen it. Two-way, obviously, that's a whole nother lane, another whole nother 12 feet you've got to put in.
Yeah, in the parking study, I had just seen, it's my fault, I guess I had seen like an interpretation where it was just like, without drawing the cut in, it had just made it look like very, very small and constricted. My second question, you had mentioned closing Court Street. I just like, you know, that's, you know.
Did you see the model that's on, is that up?
Like for the,
Okay.
Agreed, and that's exactly, I drive on Court Street every day, so the idea of closing Court Street is a little,
I had to take to try to look at your downtown from this kind of view and say, where could you get more parking if you needed to?
Right.
And the city doesn't, other than Durkee Street, doesn't own a tremendous amount of I think it was the other one on that same section. Doesn't own a lot of parcels that are assemblable. One of the really cool things about Plattsburgh is you haven't torn down all your old buildings. And that's one of the things that makes it nice here. Also one of the things that makes it hard to assemble ground for parking. So I tried to look at some opportunities, and again, consolidating the street, which is just a thoroughfare. No parking goes on, well, there's some parallel, but there, you can see behind you
Well,
now.
where's the orientation show?
So the government building is kind of center top.
And again, this is all,
Street on the right.
this is completely conceptual of an opportunity to make more out of that land than is currently there. And so that was just a conceptual opportunity to increase the amount of parking in that area.
Oh, yeah, thank you for showing me that.
so
I
John,
wasn't gonna-
how many more spaces are increased by, if that
Consolidated,
plan was
maybe.
adopted?
Well, you have to take into account that the parking spaces that go along with the government building, they're going to need a certain number of those.
I think there was more than 70, less than 100 spaces gained there by. You look at how you want, but we're taking out a fair amount of curb lawn and other stuff. So how much green is ultimately gonna have to go back in there affects your space counts as well. There's a lot that goes into space counts and how you use the land. Unfortunately, it costs a whole lot more surface area to park a car than it does to park a person.
Yeah.
So about 325 square feet per car if you're doing things well. And so the more rectangular or piece of land that you can get that fits those dimensions, the better efficiency and the less land you have dedicated to parking, which is ultimately the goal. I hate to see cities that are all paved over. There's nothing uglier. So.
And then just quick last question, just like a yes or no. So you had said like it's a 6 to 9 months estimate usually, and I know it's just an estimate. Does that estimate, is that like specific to Plattsburgh, like, or does that estimate usually like kind of have a parking authority as a given, like in a city?
It's an estimate that I think is reasonable for Plattsburgh, considering that there's work to be done, just laying the groundwork for what it would look like, and then doing the hard work of working out the details, which so many people have questions over. What are the rates? What are the hours? What is this? How many staff do we need? And then all that. It just takes time to continue to build that. And I'm not a big fan of rolling out before you're ready, because then it's just a disaster and everybody says, look, doesn't work. And you don't want that. I mean, everybody should want it to work. If you're gonna go through the time, the hassle, the energy, the money, everything, it should work for the city and be a net positive. So.
Thanks.
Thank you.
So we have time for 2 more speakers. Anyone who isn't able to say what they need to, Matthew's information's on the website, his email's on the website, even supplementary questions, thoughts, concerns that you think of after today. Matthew is your conduit to be able to send that information.
Sorry, will there be another opportunity like this?
When is?
We don't have anything currently planned, but as the parking program is fleshed out and the details are made more clear, we may well request another public comment section, but again, that'll be determined as things move forward.
So I think it was, I'm just trying to see if there's anyone that has another opportunity to speak yet. I think, Peter, did you want to say something?
No.
I thought, no, someone else had their hands up. Was it Joe? Okay.
One quick thing. Won't take up much of your time. Well, I'd just like to say that I hope you don't take the consideration of paving Trinity Park off the docket, because that's been here a long time. It's a focal point of many events. People hang out there in the summertime or whatever.
And
It's
Jeff,
precious little green space.
that was just, it was, yeah, that was, he took any possible opportunity.
Okay.
Even if it wasn't an opportunity, he said, what land does the city actually own that could theoretically be developed?
Okay, well, I saw it on there and I was just hoping.
I'm glad someone brought
If
that
you
up.
freaked out, you were like us.
Yes, no,
Okay, very
for
good,
sure.
that's all I have.
Also very quick, when you're talking about this parking lot here, next to the county parking lot, if this is something that ends up happening, are you gonna make sure that they still continue to use their parking lot over on Oak Street, and this part will be for the people that are shopping downtown? Because if the county people start parking over here, then you're gonna have an empty lot down on Oak Street.
Right.
And people are gonna have to go over there to park.
And again, just like Trinity Park, he just took any possible
Well,
open
so I'm just
space where there could be.
mentioning, if you're saying if this happens,
Absolutely.
that happens. So
Yeah.
Well, and that's actually a
You
great.
don't want that parking taken up by the people at the government center when they have their own lot.
Well, that's a great point. I'm pretty sure that a lot of employees who work at the government center park on the street because it's free and it's right there, and if a spot's open,
Maybe
they'll
they
take
should
it.
be utilizing their parking instead of taking up the spots for shoppers and other people that wanna come downtown.
I agree, and that's a great example of the managed, how a managed parking system can enhance efficiencies, because there is a parking spot for county employees over on Oak Street. You're very right.
So I guess in conclusion, very grateful to see this level of participation and the fact that you all took your time to come out today. Again, Matthew's information is on the city website under community development, so any other thoughts, concerns, questions, recommendations about any of these 14 or anything else that you think could be helpful throughout the process, it's all in motion, it's all underway, nothing has been decided, and all of your input has been very helpful. So I thank you so much for being here.
Yes,
Thank you all. How soon is, like, the decision's gonna be kind of final? I mean, in a couple months, or?
Which decisions?
Well,
The
like,
14th.
what you're gonna plan for the parking?
We hope to have a more detailed plan put together within the next several months.
But we do want what our May 4th deadline.
Yes,
meets.
we'd like to have a list of recommendations to place before the economic development consultant that the council will choose to put together the developer RFP for the Dock Street and the Durkee Street projects, ready to hand them on the day that they are chosen, which I am hoping to be on May, is it the 3rd?
Yes.
Yeah, May 3rd.
With a 3-week. Okay.
Yep.
But, I don't know, the 14 recommendations, where do these go from here? Is that the question?
Well, more or less, I mean, you have to make a decision, that's why we're here, you wanna know what
Right.
people
Right.
feel about the
Right.
parking, so if you
Right.
wanna know if people don't want that, or do want that, or do they
Right.
want the diagonal parking on Derby, like, we're gonna make some decisions pretty soon. So that's why I want to know, when is that pretty soon? Like, how soon should people make sure they get any more input they have in? And that's, I think, why they're asking if there's gonna be another meeting, so we can have more input, or is all the input gotta be written out to Matt, or just the?
No, you can reach out to me at any time. And again, I'd like to stress that these are recommendations that the council will put before the economic development consultants. It will certainly not bind them to follow every one of them if it is deemed unworkable from a practicality standpoint, but it is a guidebook that we would like them to follow. That is something that council is comfortable with, and also the community at large.
But I think John, I mean, I've got the impression from John that our first step, as I mentioned right at the beginning of the meeting, is to put together this parking program for a paid system. And that's got to happen, you know, we've got to hit the ground running with that.
That's the first step.
Yeah.
With your existing parking right now, you're talking about.
For the existing parking right now. Mm-hmm.
So you're gonna put a paid parking program in place for the existing?
I think you should do that after the development is over, and we have all the parking lots.
What we're gonna do is develop it at a,
Because if we lose 300 parking lots and you put that thing in the system right now, you're gonna kill us.
Here's my,
You know what I'm saying?
in the details of when you start charging and how all that works, still details to be worked out. But I've recommended that you start looking at managing your parking system, because when those 289 spots disappear, if you're not doing anything and there's no one to call and there's no one looking out for things, it's gonna be chaos. The reason to get a managed system up and running is so that you can deal with the changes that are coming. Now, whether you start charging in 2 weeks, and I'm not recommending that, don't take that, don't put that in the paper, or you don't start charging until you're fully up and running, that's a whole nother discussion. But getting the management group in place so that you can manage how all this is gonna go over the next 18 months, because construction's messy, it's always messy, and it does disrupt. But it's exciting, it's kind of cool to see things come out of the ground.
Oh, I misinterpreted your recommendation then, so, yeah, that would be a little startling to try to put the paid system in place right away, then, you're saying.
I'm not saying roll out and start charging next week. I'm saying put a plan together to start managing the system, because things are going to change. My assumption, again, has been from the things are going to change. And if you're not managing that change, you will simply be a cork on the water, and it will control you, and every meeting will be about, why aren't you doing this, why aren't you doing that? You put the changes in place, you put the management system in place so you can deal with the changes as you go forward.
What do you people think? You want this starting right away or after? We should decide. I think, right? So what do you people want?
I think most people are in support of a parking, managed parking, and that things be enforced, especially even already existing rules. We don't even have to change the rules, they just need to be enforced. But what we're struggling with is the timeline, and all of this stuff happening as a direct result of the development of the Durkee Street parking lot, and the timeline of having these conflicting timelines for all of this stuff to happen.
So what you're saying is you would like a clear path, a clear set of time, events that are going to go forward, written down, and those.
And ideally, we would like to see.
Those are in development, is what I'm saying. We don't have those yet.
Yeah, but ideally, development of the Durkee Street lot happening in a much more incremental rate and over a longer period of time than is required by the DRI grant.
Okay.
Yes?
Point well taken.
Yeah, and demonstrated interest in the development in the first place. It's kind of putting the cart before the horse.
Yeah.
And guys, we are over the 6:30 time that we had set, so again, I'd like to thank all of you for coming out and participating, and this will be an ongoing process.
Please make another meeting.
Yeah,
Please.
Will there be an opportunity to talk about the DRI development and how that parking lot gets developed and the timeline for that?
I'm sorry.
There's a lot of when this happens, but you haven't given us a date. Like, when is what we're asking. We're asking when. And you're telling us when.
It's uncertain. It's in development. Okay.
Yes.
As it goes
And I
forward,
think all along on the website, even before Matt came to the office, there had been, because in response to some of the questions that had been brought forward at the council meeting, you know, updates on the website as to what the developments are. And so we want to continue with that. What?
I mean, okay.
Can we, let's not, I gotcha. We're hearing you say you want more, another meeting. I think we can arrange that. All right,
Yeah.
so let's just continue the conversation.
I mean, I don't mean to come across as venomous, but it is frustrating that, because of where are the updates?
What do you mean?
Where, like, we're supposed to be updated on the data, we're supposed to be updated, like, I feel like we've been like having a fight during this meeting as to like tiptoe around, this is specifically for the DRI grant. Like, the reason, like, we have.
Oh, yeah, you have to move the parking lot, you have to
Yeah.
make room for the development in the parking lot, yeah.
Yeah.
Because
Because of this DRI, because of the DRI. Like, the state is telling us that we have to renovate this parking lot, but we can't talk about the DRI grant? And then all of the many of the recommendations are involving the DRI grant. We don't even know how we're gonna fund this for a parking manager. Pete, we're firing everybody from all these, like, there's a lot of things that are that need to be worked out. And I think we can work together as a community to do it. It does fall on our representatives to do it.
I think the community was wise in voting strongly for development at the currently unused parking lot down by the waterfront, because they saw that as an easy target for development, as opposed to this lot that comes with a lot of issues, even though we all want to see it develop into something better.
Yeah.
I'd like to say something to all of you strong townspeople. I used to be a strong town person too. I attended several meetings several years ago, and I like what you stand for and what you do, and please continue to do it. But the way I like to think of this, it makes me feel much better about it, is that if you think about this city 120 years ago, there was no Durkee Street parking lot. Do you know what was in that block of Durkee Street? Buildings, people, industrial activity. This city was humming. This city was humming 120 years ago. If you walk down on Bridge Street, you actually had to, jostle your way through to get places. And those are really, really good problems for a downtown to have. But somewhere around 60 years ago, as all of you are aware, there was this move to put everything in the suburbs, okay? We're going to build shopping centers, we're going to build interstate highways, and we're going to build all the conveniences along the interstate highways. And that effectively killed our downtowns. So here we are, a dying city, and somebody says, and I don't think it was a bad decision at all, somebody said, we're going to build a parking lot and we're going to attract people downtown. And slowly but surely that happened, and that's good. That was a good solution. But now we need another solution, and the solution is people are telling us by their actions and their words, we hear it all the time, I wish I could live downtown. I wish I could work downtown. I wish I could walk downtown from my neighborhood and feel good about it and know that it's going to be a good journey. So we're at a point where, 120 years later, we need to start thinking about how do we redevelop that Durkee Street area? How do we make it a place to live and work once again, as it was 120 years ago? And then, in 120 years from now, we hope somebody will be saying, parking lots are a thing of the past. We don't need them anymore. Let's take them out. So that's what I would like to see.
I just want to jump in really quick and say, in 2016, you also said that the DRI would be better if it was broken up into dozens and dozens of small projects rather than a couple big ones.
Jeremiah,
and that's how downtowns developed 120 years ago.
We're not here to talk about the DRI specifically tonight, so let's save that. Let's put that on the table. We'll come back to it. But I'd like for everybody to think about this just in terms of, this is part of the evolution of a city. People moved out, they all moved to the suburbs, they all shopped in the suburbs, and now they're telling us they want to come back. We gotta have a place for them to live, work, and play. So that's what this is all about, and that's what we're gonna do. Okay?
Well, and on
It's
the
gonna be
other
really
hand,
hard, but we're gonna do it.
You know, and we appreciate the way in which you're trying to jog our thinking and trying to, you know, be catalysts for change that you passionately believe in. On the other hand, you're a group, you've organized, you're a block. Where, I mean, I've got, how many people are here that just came? I mean, okay, so 2. What I'm saying is 3, 4, 5. Okay.
It wasn't advertised that the meeting was going on. I saw it in the paper. I didn't see it.
And 20 businesses signed our petition, and like, minimizing our.
I went around to every downtown business and handed out a flyer that this meeting was happening, and the majority of the people came because of that, and they said nobody from the city came in and spoke to them. So that's what I did.
Well, a press release was sent out last week to all the local media.
I know, but you know, there's.
You gotta meet them where they are.
Yeah.
Okay.
Not everybody's just gonna see a thing in the paper. I'm just telling you, that's what I did. That's why a lot of people are here.
No, we'll try to do better about
I mean, and
reaching
I'm
out
not saying,
to.
like, I'm happy to do that. You know, I'm trying to help by doing that.
Okay.
By getting people involved.
Hmm?
Next time, ask her.
Yeah.
Give her the flyers next time.
Okay. All right.
So will there be, Mr. Kelly, I like that you said that that's a conversation for a different time. Can we have a meeting to talk about that at some point?
I don't see why not.
Okay.
We have all kinds of meetings, why not? Yeah.
Well, and the thing is.
Can we like make that a public meeting that everybody knows about, that, you know, I don't have to get a flyer from Danielle?
We can't do meetings otherwise, but the thing is, there is a plan in terms of the development of the DRI for citizen input. The consultant that will eventually be hired to take a look at what we could do with the Durkee Street parking lot in terms of the development part will part of what we want for them is to solicit more citizen input.
Right.
So I mean, and that's been, I think, you know, kind of the concept all along.
Will the public have any like opportunity to vet the person who's hired for that?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's citizen advisory committees for each one of the contractors that have contracts that we've entered into so far.
For Durkee and Dock?
Not for Durkee and Dock, but for the streetscape.
There are for Durkee and Dock. Well, it's in the RFP anyways, but I did send an email to Matt about that. I have not heard back yet how people get involved.
Yep,
And
I saw your
how
email.
someone get on that board.
Okay. All right. Do I gavel
Anybody
out?
hungry for dinner?
One more tiny thing. Where's the best place for me to find out about things that are happening and like see the timeline as you guys create it amongst yourselves?
Come to city council meetings.
Website.
Both of those.
His office. He has a email address. He has a DRI list on his.
And the community development page.
Yeah,
on
on the city
community
website.
development page, yes.
All of us counselors have email addresses, so if there's anything you're curious about, please contact
Yeah, I was
us.
just like, you to put it out rather than me to come looking for it. I
Okay.
don't want to have to make you take extra time to email everyone.
No, fair enough. Fair enough.
Okay.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Hello. Oh, hold on one second. Let me, hey, Josh, could you stop the streaming? Sure. Thanks.
Sorry, I just